Okay, I'm president here, and I'm going to manage the gavel. Start the meeting. Do we have a quorum?
Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
Director Tommy Popeye, Director Desi Alvarez, Director Scott Houston, and President Donald Deere.
Here.
Mr. President, we do not have a quorum for the regular or for the special meeting of the Board of Directors. However, there are no action items on the agenda today, so we can proceed with the MWD caucus if that's your preference.
We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go on to public comment.
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your hand in the room or your virtual hand. And Mr. President, we have no hands raised.
All right. Go on to item 4. Special items.
Mr. President, item 4A is going to be an update on alternatives to the proposed biennial budget rates and charges for fiscal years 26-27 and 27-28. We have Caetano Cassane, Assistant General Manager and Chief Financial Officer, Adam Benson, the Finance Group Manager, and Arnaud Vandenberg, Revenue and Budget Manager from the MWD online for this presentation.
Very good. Okay. Welcome, gentlemen.
So thank you. Thank you for, are we ready, EJ?
Yes, Caetano, this is Eric Owens. EJ can't join us today, but we are ready. It's your show when you're ready.
Okay, so we're ready. So we don't really have a lot to discuss this time. We have, you all know that we've spent the last, 8 months talking about the budget. We've come to you now a couple of times. And I think this is our last time since we are trying to adapt the budget next week. So what we have today is what we took to the board last week and the alternatives that people presented. We will discuss just overview of what is coming next week. Obviously, we can't get into discussing what is in front of the board, so we don't create any serial situations. But we are happy to give you an overview of what we think we're going to be bringing to the board. But today, we just want to let folks know what was discussed at the board meeting last meeting. So Anna is going to just run through the 3 scenarios that were last discussed and how we're moving forward to the board discussion next week. So Anna, are you ready?
Caetano, I can do it.
Adam, you can go.
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead,
I can do
Adam.
it. I know Arnaud's here as well. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. Adam Benson, Group Finance Manager for Metropolitan. Arnaud is our Revenue and Budget Section Manager, and he's certainly here to answer any questions. As Caetano mentioned, I just have a few update slides that I wanted to provide as part of this discussion. If I could get you to advance to the next slide, we can jump right in. Great. So going into workshop number 4, which was held on March 24th with the Metropolitan Board, we really had a handful of scenarios that we costed. 2 were proposed by member agencies. Towards the bottom of this table, you can see that the City of Los Angeles submitted a proposal, as did Eastern, Western, and the MODOC delegations. The top of the table reflects the revised proposed budget, which is where we started this process. That had a base CIP of $950 million, as we had talked with you last time we were with West Basin, to effectively improve metropolitan system reliability by increasing our spend for our R&R projects It had 89 new staff positions related to O&M, with some positions linked to that increased CIP budget, as well as some other investments in our operating equipment and conservation, and it maintained a property tax rate at the current 0.007% range. And then we presented those overall rate increases for the revised proposed budget, both with the full stage 1 45 MGD pure water project and with only the grant component. So no new dollars, just what we already have in existing grants. And you can see that over the upcoming biennium in the revised proposed, we were looking at a 2-year increase in rates of about 18.5%. And then if you were just to fund the grant portion of the pure water project, 17.5%. The Eastern, Western, and MODOC proposal in light blue came into us to cost, and we presented that. It had a property tax rate of 0.01%. It had some refined staffing, so they had requested that we bring staffing down to a more reasonable level, and we reduced that from the proposed budget increase of about 105 down to, I think, 89 positions. They had only requested to continue the pure water project with the available grant funds, and then they wanted to fully fund Metropolitan's $30.5 million annual spend on conservation. With that increased property tax rate, the 2-year rate increase under the MODOC Eastern Western proposal was about 10.8%. And then with the Los Angeles proposal, we had costed slightly different assumptions. The major one being a change to our water transaction exceedance assumption. So in the current budget, under board adopted policy back in July 2025, for rate setting purposes, we use a 70% exceedance on our water transaction assumption. The city of LA asked us to look at what the rate impact would be if we were to lower that exceedance to 60%. So effectively to be less conservative in our demands, which mitigates the rate impact. They had requested that we provide no new staffing, so to eliminate all of the additional positions that were requested in the revised proposed budget, and to reduce the CIP to $800 million, and to set our pay-go expenditures, so that portion of the capital improvement program that we would fund out of current rates instead of long-term debt at 35%. So they said lower that from the estimated 40 to 41% down to 35, and then fully fund our local resource program and our conservation program. And that resulted in a 2-year rate increase of about 9.6%. Staff then presented several alternatives in the royal blue color in the middle of this table. And basically what we did was take the Eastern Western MODOC proposal and reflect it at different property tax levels. And you can see that reflected in alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3 at 0.007, 0.008, and 0.009% respectively. And then you can see each of the annual rate increases that were commensurate with those proposals over the 2 years, both with the stage 1 45 MGD pure water option and with the grant funded component of pure water only. So that's really where we were in the last workshop. If I could get you to go to the next slide. This is the requests that came out of that workshop. So in response to the information that we presented, a number of directors submitted different requests that slightly modified their original proposals. The first one was brought forward by the MODOC delegation. It had a $950 million CIP, the grant-funded only component of pure water with reduced staffing and a full conservation spend at a property tax rate of 0.009%. That resulted in a 12% 2-year rate increase, so 6% per year. The San Diego delegation lowered the CIP spend to $875 million, only funded pure water stage 1 at the $75.8 million grant level, and then further reduced staff down to 79 positions, and also asked us to reduce the conservation spend down to the minimum amount necessary to meet our matching grant requirements and existing commitments at $23.1 million and $15.5 million in each of the years respectively. and they had requested a slightly lower property tax rate at 0.0085% relative to the MODOC proposal. So very close. I mean, both of those proposals, as you can see, are within 0.3% of each other. But the San Diego proposal that were labeled here as the Miller proposal had a 11.4% two-year rate increase. And then we were also asked to take the Miller proposal and show what the rate impact would be if we fully funded the $150 million request for the 45 MGD stage 1 option. And that increased the rates by about 0.5% per year, up to 6.2% each year, with all of the other assumptions remaining the same. So it's really just the same as the Miller proposal, but with the full 150 million available for the Pure Water program. You could go to the next slide. Since this board meeting that we had on March 24th to workshop 4, we did receive additional direction from the MODOC and San Diego delegations. Given the closeness of their proposals, they actually submitted to us a revised joint proposal that is somewhere in between the two asks that we received and we reflected on the prior slide. That is the information that we are currently preparing full cost of service reports on, a very detailed board letter, and a presentation that we plan to take at our next FAME and board meeting on April 14th. And it generally aligns with the Miller proposal. It has a property tax rate of 0.0085%. It does bring conservation funding back up to our $30.5 million annual spend, and it includes a reduced staffing request of 79 positions. So it cut the number of positions being added to our budget by an additional 10. And it also reflected a grant-only funding for Pure Water. And I believe that is all of the core changes that they had brought forward to us. So that's what we're working on for April 14th. Yeah, go ahead, Katana.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And so that combined letter with a Camacho still request to add Pure Water, so that will be a separate option. So we're coming back to the board with two options: the Miller or now MODOC's San Diego proposal, and second, just fully funding the 150 is a Camacho. So that's what the board will be debating in next Tuesday. And we're still working through that. So that's where we are right now. So I'll give it back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Catano.
All right.
Director Deere, we have some time for questions. If
There are any questions? Yeah, yes?
oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Cadano, this is Anatol. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Just fine. It's great to always hear from you. I was curious, I tried to follow, because you don't have it on the presentation, on the combined MODOC San Diego proposal. You may have said it, I just didn't hear it clearly. The proposal on the CIP, on that joint proposal, is it to maintain it at 950, or is there a reduction proposed in the MODOC San Diego? 875.
Yep.
So my question is, as Metropolitan puts together the proposal for board consideration, it is a budget proposal, that's true. In the explanation of the impacts of that proposal in the subsequent years, will the deferral action of that quantity in the CIP show up as immediate impacts to the next year's CIP, or is engineering revising their CIP as a result of that proposed action?
I'm gonna start and I'll have Adam, since he's been working with May. I don't know if John or May are online. They're actually revising to meet that goal, but part of what they said to us is that it's about $75 million. and typically year two, they start looking at where there are delays. So it might end up being a delay of something to the third year, third year budget. But I think that's what they're working on, just sort of taking everything they have and prioritizing where if they have to delay a few things, then that's what they'll do. Adam, I don't know if you have any more information than that.
Yeah, no. So, we're really trying to balance, and I don't know if May or John Bednarski are on, but May and the engineering team will be taking this to the engineering committee on Monday at the lower $875 million. I think at the last workshop, the board had spent a lot of time really asking very, very prudent questions about which projects are not directly tied to water reliability and can we defer them or delay them. So the engineering team in May took a very hard look at the projects and they have come up with a revised approach. Some of this will really mean just managing the cash flows. So not necessarily taking projects off the table, Anatole, but maybe delaying when they would actually start those projects later in the fiscal year to manage cash. That does mean that we will have increased need in the upcoming biennium. So it's not going to reset us to 875 with some growth. It's going to bump up the next CIP back to the original request plus the 4%. But it does mean some of the projects in there will either get delayed or they'll have to be pushed out into a future biennium. But we will reflect the higher level need over the multi-year forecast that comes with the budget.
Okay. The reason I was asking that question was just the principle or the concept that engineering is proposing is that it's a baseline CIP. And it's true that, it's important to note that on a baseline CIP, given all the presentations that engineering has done, those are the obligations each and every year. And so you can manage cash flow, you can defer projects, but if indeed it's a baseline CIP, there's a lot of work to be done by engineering because this simply cascades biennium after biennium. And so I just wanted to make sure that, and when I have to advise my director, that they're paying attention to those subsequent effects of what admittedly is a compromise in order to manage budget and rates in this biennium.
And you are very correct in that assumption. It's exactly what we're doing. Move it out to the next budget and it keeps pushing it out. It keeps delaying unless we completely remove projects. At this time, that's not what they're doing. So you're right. It's really a delay and sort of trying to prioritize what goes first.
Okay. Other questions?
A few. Thank you for the presentation. Just can you clarify? You said you're going to be taking two options to next week's meeting. Can you clarify for what are you calling kind of the Camacho alternative? Is the only difference between that one and the MODOC in San Diego County the pure water funding, or are there other
That's it.
adjustments?
That's it. That's the only difference.
Okay. And then on the new staffing positions, whether it's the 79 or the 89, can you speak to whether any of those staffing positions would be for staff that are assigned to the Pure Water Southern California program?
So the Pure Water of Southern California were already removed. Yeah, remember we have 105. We're not funding any pure water positions right now. The additional drop of 10 is just an additional drop of some position that we will have to identify. But yeah, the San Diego Miller settled on 79. And we have to just manage, Shivanshi will have to manage where we did do the cut, but it already included a cut of the 10 pure water.
Okay, thank you. And then it sounds like both options will include the full conservation funding.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And then I guess just another question on the exceedance level for the sales forecasts. Are both options coming in with maintaining that 70% exceedance level? So the more conservative sales assumption?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And by the
Thank you.
way, I think the letter was distributed publicly. I could be wrong, but those letters, I believe, were distributed. And we're just really following whatever the letters say.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Director Deere. Good afternoon, Catano. This is Tammy. And Adam.
Tammy.
So, hi, so I had a question regarding the property tax rate. On that slide, it had said that, the property tax rate above 0.007 would fund a larger share of the state water project cost. So what is the percentage of that larger share? Is it like a 70%, larger share? What is that amount? And then the second question would be, if the property tax rate is increased to either 0.005 or 0.009, what portion would cover the state water project cost? Of the tax
Adam, I didn't
collected.
hear all of it, so can you take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, in this fiscal year, we're anticipating generating at the 0.007%, so at the current rate, about $400 million in property tax revenue across the whole service area. We had assumed in our budget about $700 million in budgeted state water contract costs. The actuals on that are coming in a little bit less. Due to some savings we're having on our power costs and because we've left more water north in storage and haven't moved as much into the service area. So I think we're spending in the range of $600 million on the state water side against the revenue of $400 million. So right now, on an actuals, it's about 2/3. On a budget basis, it's somewhat less than that 400 out of a $700 million estimate. We estimated that each 0.0005 increase in the tax rate would yield roughly an additional $20 million or so. So going from the 0.007 to 0.0085 would add, I think, in the $60 million range. And I don't know if Arnaut has his spreadsheets open and can give me specific info if he's paying attention. But we would still be collecting roughly about just under $500 million in total property tax revenues, which is more closely aligned with the fixed component of our state water contract expenses, right? So we have both fixed costs and then we have our variable costs. We think at the 0.0085, we're probably just shy of 80% of total fixed costs, maybe 85%, somewhere in that range. So there's still room, but we're approaching the upper bound of fixed costs, which is where I think staff had originally indicated to the board that they were comfortable with, given that we don't want to over collect and we would, want to make sure that we preserve the capacity in the future if it's needed.
All right, thank you.
That was all rough estimates, Tammy. If you
Right.
want specific
Yeah.
numbers, I just back of the enveloping that. I can certainly talk to you separately. So don't run with any of that info.
All right, yeah, I know, understood. Yeah, just wanted a rough,
Yeah.
percentage estimate. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions in the room or online? Mr. President, I don't see any more questions for the presenters.
I want to thank the presenters for their presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mr. President, we do have a second item. Shanti Rosette is intending to be here in person, but I think she's hit a little bit of traffic. I might suggest that we take a 5-minute recess to allow her time. I understand she should be here about 1 o'clock.
Fine, let's do that. Are we recessed for 5 minutes to 1 now? 12 to 5?
Yep.
Okay, 5 minutes.
ready to go, Mr. President. All right,
You convene the meeting? Eric, what's on next?
Mr. President, item 4B is regarding the Colorado River Post 2026 operational guidelines. We have Shanti Rosette, Colorado River Policy Manager from MWD, here to present, and she's in the room with us.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the Colorado River Basin today, and we can start the presentation. I'm going to talk about the post-2026 operations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, along with the Bureau of Reclamation's draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS. And in that, I'm going to focus on three things. The first is the basin states negotiations, and the next is the hydrologic conditions and what they mean for those discussions. And then the third is on how the DEIS frames Reclamation's eventual decision. And you can advance slides, please. As you know, the Bureau of Reclamation owns and operates Glen Canyon Dam and will ultimately decide on how Lake Powell and Lake Mead are operated after 2026, consistent with the law of the river. And under NEPA, Reclamation is required to complete an environmental review for the post-2026 operations and issue a record of decision by October 1st. And this timeline is fixed. The DEIS, which was released in January, is legally required analysis of the impacts of the proposed federal action. It does not select an outcome or represent a policy choice, but it does matter because Reclamation's final decision must be grounded in and legally supported by the alternatives and analysis in that document. The federal deadline for the 7 basin states consensus was on February 14th. However, a consensus has not yet been reached. In March, the basin states and the lower basin contractors like Metropolitan submitted comments on the draft environmental impact statement. And we can go to the next slide. I also want to address the current hydrologic conditions. So far, this is tracking to be the driest year on record. Preliminary information indicates that Reclamation's 24-month study expects that the snow be well below what it was in 2002, which was the driest year that we have on the hydrologic record. These conditions will result in lower starting conditions at Lake Powell and at the beginning of the post-2026 guidelines. And Powell will be at or near record levels sometime later this year. This makes post-2026 operations meaningfully harder. Starting closer to Lake Powell protection thresholds means less operational flexibility from the outset and higher likelihood of lower Powell releases and earlier Lake Mead impacts, and fewer options to manage risk through timing or sequencing of actions. Next slide, please. The negotiations remain focused on key operational questions, which fall into two broad categories: operations in and above Lake Powell and operations in Lake Mead. For operations in the upper basin, the most consequential issue is Lake Powell releases, specifically how annual releases from Powell to Mead are determined under increasingly dry conditions. Closely related is the question of upper basin conservation or contributions, how much water the upper basin would conserve over the term of the agreement, and whether any conservation would be mandatory. Another central issue is the operation of the Colorado River storage project units above Lake Powell. These are known as the UIUs, and whether and how releases from the URUs are made to support releases to the lower basin, or whether it's just for protection of Glen Canyon Dam infrastructure. And this is a significant unresolved issue at this point. On the Lake Mead side, Arizona, California, and Nevada have tentatively agreed in concept on how to implement 1.5 million acre feet of reductions per year in the lower basin in Mexico. Where discussions remain unresolved is what happens above the 1.5 million acre feet per year and how additional reductions would be allocated, particularly if upper basin actions are limited or voluntary. In advance to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Okay, actually, no. That one. Okay. For Metropolitan, intentionally created surplus is particularly important, and this includes protecting existing ICS, ensuring certainty that ICS can be accessed when needed, preserving the ability to use ICS to meet lower basin reduction obligations. Metropolitan is also interested in developing a new storage program, including the ability to support interstate exchanges as part of a more flexible and resilient post-2026 operating framework. The term of the agreement is a significant issue on its own. Current basin state discussions have been focused primarily on a 1 to 5 year agreement, reflecting the uncertainty of the hydrology and risk tolerance. And some states have been discussing a phasing approach, which would include a 5-year phase-in period, followed by an agreement for operations for years 6 through 20. At this point, however, the likelihood that states reach an agreement on a longer-term framework does not appear high. And we can go to the next slide. So finally, waivers have emerged as one of the central sticking points in the negotiations. Some upper basin states have been seeking clear waivers from the lower basin as a condition for the post-2026 operations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead. At the same time, the lower basin states, particularly Arizona, have been clear that they do not want to grant a waiver absent a commitment for mandatory upper basin reductions. The tensions between waivers and mandatory actions is one of the primary issues preventing convergence at this stage. On January 27th, the Interior Secretary met with the Basin States governors in DC. At that meeting, the governors publicly affirmed their commitment to continuing to pursue a negotiated consensus on the post-2026 operations. And that message was deliberate and coordinated. At the same time, however, the meeting made clear that the basin states remain stuck on whether cuts should be taken in the lower basin only, or whether cuts should be shared between the upper and lower basin once reductions exceed 1.5 million acre feet per year. Arizona reiterated its position that reductions above 1.5 million acre feet should be shared, and Colorado reiterated its view that the upper basin conservation should be voluntary and that the upper basin should not be subject to mandatory reductions. So while the meeting demonstrated continued engagement at the governor level, it did not resolve the central disagreement, which continues to shape the negotiations. It is also important context that Arizona is signaling internally, absent a negotiated agreement that includes upper basin actions, it is unlikely to waive its compact rights and may pursue compact compliance claims in the form of litigation. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the national and regional coverage that followed the Secretary's meeting with the governors. The coverage reflects heightened political attention, concerns about the risk of impasse, and growing interest in Washington about how Colorado River operations will ultimately be resolved. And we can go to the next slide. The DEIS analyzes a wide range of potential post-2026 operations, including multiple coordination and supply-driven approaches. It does not meaningfully narrow the operational space in a policy sense. However, it does place sideboards around possible post-2026 operations, because reclamation's final decision may be grounded in what has been analyzed and must be grounded in what has been analyzed in the DEIS. The DEIS also reflects a strong emphasis on protecting Glen Canyon Dam and Lake Powell infrastructure. In several alternatives, the protection is achieved primarily through reductions in supplies that are made available to the lower basin and Mexico. Next slide, please. For Metropolitan, the DEIS matters because it evaluates how different operational frameworks affect Powell to Meade releases, Lake Meade elevations, storage determinations, ICS, and Hoover Dam power generation. Next slide, please. Metropolitan's comments are focused on modeling assumptions, legal authority, and the law of the river interpretations, water deliveries and shortages, and Hoover power generation impacts, water quality, and impacts on protected species. Many of the basin states' letters challenged the legal sufficiency of the DEIS on numerous grounds, whereas Metropolitan's letter was focused on improvements that could be made before reclamation issues the final EIS. The objective that we had was to ensure that the final record of decision rests on realistic assumptions and a sound legal and technical foundation. Next slide, please. Metropolitan's letter emphasizes the importance of dry year reliability and ICS protection. We oppose alternatives that concentrate cuts exclusively in the lower basin without modeling upper basin reductions. The Colorado River Compact created upper basin delivery obligations, and alternatives that ignore these obligations are insufficient on the basis of a NEPA analysis. Post-2026 operations need to include explicit option for interstate exchanges, which is foundational for interstate partnerships like those contemplated as part of Pure Water Southern California. And Metropolitan asks for analysis of a Glen Canyon Dam repair fix and improvements for releases of water from Powell when it is below elevation 3,500, which, as I mentioned earlier, is likely to happen this year. Next slide, please. The DEIS modeling shows that most actions in the alternatives leave ferry flows of the compact required volumes of 75 million acre feet over 10 years and half of the Mexico Treaty obligation hover just above or just below what is required in the average flow category. But below those flows, and they fall well below in the critically dry flow category. So and based on this year's hydrology, it looks like there's going to be the first time ever that the flows fall below what's required by the compact. Next slide, please. In closing, we're operating in a constrained window with worsening hydrology, unresolved basin states, disagreements, and a DEIS that will define the bounds of reclamation's final decision. Taken together, the focus is on short-term agreements, the central role of waivers, the prospect of litigation if consensus fails, and the emphasis on protecting Glen Canyon Dam. And these underscore that the next several months are very consequential for how the flexibility and risk are going to be embedded in post-2026 operations for Metropolitan. And that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Shanti. Mr. President, we have time for questions if you like.
Fine, yes, questions?
There are no questions in the room. We'd open it up to any questions online.
Thank you, Shanti. Can you maybe weigh in on how the current pretty miserable water conditions, how they're having an impact on the negotiations, if they are having an impact on them right now?
So what is happening right now, and we're in the stage where every day we're getting new information, is that there are likely to be adjustments operations water year 2026. The forecast right now is that Lake Powell is going to decline to that protection that the that reclamation takes 3 different forms of action to ensure that it stays above. So it protects elevation 3,500 because the minimum power pole is at 3,490. And they have, in the past, when they've run below that minimum power pool, it has caused damage to the intakes. And so they work to keep it above that. They have 3 options for doing that. The first is adjustments to the hourly, daily, and monthly releases. They've already implemented those changes. The next is by additional releases from the units above Lake Powell. And right now they're looking at an additional release from Flaming Gorge that will help prop up the elevation of Powell. But then third is that they are also likely to reduce the amount of water that's being released from Powell this year. That could go down from where it's supposed to be right now at 7.48 down to 6 million, which is a significant decline in the amount of water that would be flowing into Lake Mead. This won't affect Metropolitan's access to its supply this year. The shortages are set by what where Mead is at the beginning of the calendar year, and Metropolitan isn't going to have to make DCP contributions, and we will have access to our ICS throughout this year. But what it does is create a lot less flexibility for what options are going into post 2026. It gives us a lot less margin for error, and it also just raises people's level of panic significantly. And we saw how this played out in 2022, where a similar set of circumstances were happening, and it really activated people, particularly in Arizona and Colorado. And so I would anticipate that there's going to be some real panic, and that there may be a lot of additional pressure on California to agree to voluntary cuts, because those cuts would otherwise be going to others. So I wouldn't be surprised if those things happen. I will say, just as a kind of general matter, that this year being the worst that we've had on record is certainly not helpful for us reaching consensus. It doesn't make our job easier. So we're proceeding along the same course that we have been, working to protect Metropolitan's interests in the lower basin, ensure that the releases from Powell are stable and reliable for us in a way that we can plan around, and ensure that, like, within California, any cuts that are apportioned that are not borne exclusively by Metropolitan. But each one of those pieces still has yet to be resolved. We're still in the process for all of those.
Then I do have another question. As these negotiations are going on, is there any continued discussion about some of the major projects in California, for instance, Clearwater, Southern California, or DCP? Are those continuing to be discussed as part of the negotiations, or are either by us or by the other basin states?
So the way that we have been talking about Clearwater, Southern California, specifically in the context of the basin states negotiations, is in a fairly narrow way, which is just to ensure that the new set of guidelines includes language that permits the kind of exchange that we've been contemplating if we were to enter into a long-term agreement with a partner like the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which we have been in negotiations with them, and they are very interested in having a long-term partnership with Metropolitan on that. And so we have been, that's been a through line from the beginning of the discussions through now. There have been ways that it comes up, but that's been the only way that we've been specifically advocating for it. You know, if we don't get a record of decision, it's possible that Reclamation will just decide with all of the threats of litigation that they're facing right now, that they'll just revert to the 1970 rules and do things on a year by year basis to make releases. Then we would look at doing a rulemaking process within Reclamation to get the authority we need to make those interstate exchanges. And so that there have been other discussions, but that's been the only one that we've kind of been formally advancing.
Thank you. Other questions?
And we do not have any questions online.
Well, we've concluded our agenda today. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. President.
I want to thank you all for participating. We appreciate very much the reports that were given, and that this meeting is adjourned.
Which Director Alvarez did join us during the first presentation.
Oh, okay, good. Glad you heard that.